For months, it felt like I was slowly fading from my own family. Like a shadow at the edges of their lives, always just out of focus. And the worst part? I thought it was my fault. I used to be so close with everyone, especially my parents. We had our Sunday dinners, our holiday traditions, our random weeknight calls. But after my brother, Ethan, had his son, Leo, it was like a switch flipped. Suddenly, the calls stopped, the invitations dried up, and I was just gone. I'd lie awake at night, replaying every conversation, every interaction, trying to pinpoint what I'd done wrong. Had I said something? Was I not excited enough about Leo? It ate at me, this slow, gnawing feeling that I was no longer needed, no longer part of the picture. I started convincing myself that maybe I just wasn't good with babies, or that my life was too different now, and they simply didn't know how to include me. It hurt, deeply, but I figured I just had to adjust. Until that one Sunday. We were at my parents' house, gathered around their dining table, and Ethan was in full swing, you know? He was gesturing dramatically with his fork, spinning this elaborate tale about why I'd supposedly bailed on last weekend's barbecue. He told everyone I'd texted him some excuse about work deadlines while he was out setting up the grill. She always has something, he'd said, shaking his head, like he was genuinely disappointed. Right, Chloe? Always too busy for family. My parents just nodded along. My mom's face had that familiar look of hurt confusion, the one that made my stomach clench. My dad just stared at his plate, probably thinking about how I used to be the one who never missed Sunday dinners. It felt like a punch to the gut, hearing him paint me as the one who didn't care. But something in me just snapped that day. I pulled out my phone, my fingers flying as I scrolled to the text thread with Ethan from last Friday. My heart was pounding, a wild drumbeat against my ribs, as I found exactly what I was looking for. Actually, Ethan, I said, my voice probably a little sharper than I intended, holding up the screen for everyone to see. Want to tell them what you really texted me? His fork, halfway to his mouth, stopped dead. What are you talking about? He asked, his eyes wide. I cleared my throat, feeling a rush of adrenaline, and read directly from his message. Mom's doing a small thing this weekend. Just immediate family. You'd probably be bored anyway since it's all baby stuff with Leo. The table went completely silent. My mom's water glass stopped halfway to her lips. That's not, Ethan started, his voice suddenly tight. Oh, there's more, I interrupted, scrolling down. And then Sunday morning, you sent, hope you enjoyed your free weekend. Mom asked where you were, and I just said you were probably swamped with work again. My dad's chair creaked as he leaned back, his eyes narrowing on Ethan. Ethan, what is she talking about? She's twisting it. Ethan said quickly, that high pitch coming into his voice that I knew meant he was caught. I was just trying to what? I snapped, my voice louder now, cracking a little. To make sure I didn't show up? To tell Mom and Dad I was too selfish to care about family, while you made sure I never got invited in the first place? My mom set her glass down hard enough that water sloshed onto the table. Chloe, why didn't you tell us you never got an invitation? Because I thought you just didn't want me there. I said, my throat tight, the words catching. Every time I called to ask about family stuff, you'd say, oh, we already made plans. Or, it's just going to be low-key. I figured after Leo was born, I just didn't fit anymore. Ethan was shaking his head frantically. That's not what happened. You're making this sound way worse than, show me your phone, then, I challenged, sliding mine across the table to Dad. Show them the text where you invited me to anything in the last 6 months. I don't have to prove anything, Ethan said, but he'd gone visibly pale. This is ridiculous. You're being dramatic. My dad was already scrolling through my phone, his expression getting darker with each swipe. Mom leaned over to read alongside him, and I watched her face crumble as she saw message after message of Ethan telling me about family events I'd supposedly chosen to skip. Oh my God, Mom whispered, her voice barely a breath. Chloe, honey, I had no idea. There's a whole conversation from Leo's birthday party, I said, my voice shaking now, a tremor running through me. Ethan told me you said it was too chaotic for extra people, so I sent Leo's present with him instead. Then, I looked at Mom, and apparently, he told you I was too busy to even show up. I never said that, Mom replied, looking between Ethan and me, confused. I asked him why you weren't coming, and he said you had work things. Because that's what he told me you said. I shot back. That I understood I was in a busy phase of my career and didn't want to pressure me. The room erupted. Dad started demanding explanations from Ethan, while Mom kept apologizing to me, her hand reaching for mine across the table. And Ethan? He kept insisting everyone was misunderstanding him. But I could see it in his eyes, that panicked look of someone whose lies were unraveling faster than he could spin new ones. This is insane, Ethan said, standing up abruptly. I'm not going to sit here and be accused of. Sit down, Dad said, his voice cutting through the chaos like a knife. You're not going anywhere until we figure out what the hell has been going on. Ethan dropped back into his chair like a deflated balloon. For the first time in months, he didn't have a smooth response ready, and my parents were looking at me like they actually wanted to hear what I had to say. Dad kept scrolling through my phone, his jaw getting tighter with each message. Mom was reading over his shoulder, making little gasping sounds every few seconds. This one's from Easter, Dad said, his voice deadly quiet. Ethan told Chloe we were keeping it small this year because I wasn't feeling well, but I was fine. That day, I kept asking where she was. And this one? Mom said, pointing at the screen, her finger trembling slightly. From Chloe's birthday dinner. He told her we already had too many people coming. Ethan was gripping his water glass so hard I thought it might crack. You're both taking this completely out of context. I was trying to manage expectations. Manage expectations? Dad's voice rose, a dangerous edge to it. You told us she was too busy to come to family events while telling her we didn't want her there. How exactly is that managing anything except keeping your sister away from her own family? That's not what I was doing, Ethan said, but he couldn't look any of us in the eye. Chloe, you know that's not what I meant. I stared at him across the table. Then what did you mean? Because I have 6 months of messages here where you're basically playing middleman, making sure I never actually talk to Mom and Dad directly about plans. Mom was shaking her head slowly, like she was trying to process everything, a profound sadness clouding her features. Chloe, honey, I thought you were going through some kind of phase where you needed space from family. Ethan said you were focusing on your career and didn't want us to pressure you. When did I ever say that? I asked, my voice raw. When have I ever in my entire life said I wanted space from this family? You didn't, Dad said grimly. Because Ethan never asked you. He just decided for everyone. He turned to Ethan, his eyes piercing. What I want to know is why. Why would you do this to your sister? Ethan finally looked up, and for a second, I saw something desperate in his expression. Because every time she shows up, it becomes about her. Leo's my son. But the minute Chloe walks in, suddenly everyone's asking about her job, her apartment, her dating life. She gets all the attention without even trying. The table went dead silent. My mom's mouth actually fell open. Are you serious right now? I asked, completely flabbergasted. You think I was stealing attention from your baby? Not from Leo, Ethan said quickly, looking around as if for an escape route. From me? From Nora and me. We're the ones who made you grandparents, but you still treat Chloe like she's the golden child. Dad set my phone down carefully, like he was afraid he might throw it. Ethan, your sister missed Easter, my birthday, your son's first birthday party, and half a dozen other family gatherings because you lied to all of us. And you're sitting here telling us it's because you were jealous? I wasn't jealous. Ethan protested, but it sounded weak. You were pathetic, Mom said, and the contempt in her voice was devastating. You were so threatened by your own sister that you had to sabotage her relationships with everyone she loves. Nora, Ethan's wife, had been quiet this whole time, feeding Leo in his high chair, but now she cleared her throat softly. Ethan, she said, her voice strained. You told me Chloe was always canceling on family stuff because she thought we were boring now that we had a baby. Everyone turned to look at her. Ethan looked like he wanted to disappear into his chair. I never said that either, I said to Nora. Nora, I was so excited when Leo was born. I bought him this whole collection of board books and kept asking Ethan when I could come meet him. He kept saying you guys were too tired for visitors. Nora's face changed completely, a dawning horror in her eyes. But Ethan told me you said babies weren't really your thing and you'd wait until he was older to get involved. Oh my God, Mom breathed, putting a hand to her chest. Ethan, what have you done? Ethan was looking around the table like a cornered animal. I was trying to protect everyone. Chloe's always been the favorite, and I thought if she wasn't around as much, maybe you'd actually focus on Nora and Leo and me for once. By lying to everyone? Dad's voice was getting louder, vibrating with barely contained fury. By manipulating every conversation and every invitation? By making your wife think her sister-in-law didn't want to know her own nephew? I didn't manipulate anyone, Ethan said, but his voice cracked. I handled the communication. You handled it by lying, I said, the words coming out flat and cold. To Mom and Dad, to Nora, to me. You made me think my own parents didn't want me around anymore. Mom reached across the table and grabbed my hand, squeezing it tight. Sweetie, we always want you around. We were heartbroken thinking you didn't want to be part of the family anymore. And I was heartbroken thinking you didn't want me to be part of it, I said, my voice thick, the tears finally starting to prick at my eyes. Do you know how many nights I sat in my apartment wondering what I'd done wrong? Wondering why having a grandchild meant you didn't need a daughter anymore? Dad turned back to Ethan, and his expression was thunderous. Your sister has been suffering for months, thinking her family abandoned her. Because you couldn't handle not being the center of attention for 5 minutes. That's not fair, Ethan said weakly. You don't understand the pressure. The pressure of what? Nora interrupted, and now she looked genuinely angry. Ethan, I've been wondering why Chloe seemed so distant. I thought I'd done something to offend her. You told me she just wasn't family-oriented anymore. Ethan looked trapped. I was trying to make things easier for everyone. Easier for you? Dad corrected, his voice a low growl. At everyone else's expense. Mom was still holding my hand, squeezing it like she was afraid I might disappear. Chloe, I am so sorry. How could you have known? I said, looking at her, my eyes swimming. He made sure you couldn't know. Every time I tried to bring up family stuff, he'd already given you some explanation for why I wasn't around. The room fell quiet, except for Leo babbling contentedly in his high chair, completely oblivious to the fact that his dad had just blown up the entire family dynamic. Ethan sat there, staring at his plate, and I could practically see him trying to figure out how to spin this into something that wasn't his fault. But for the first time in months, no one was buying whatever he was about to sell. My phone started buzzing before I even got home from dinner. Ethan had sent me 3 texts in the span of 10 minutes. Thanks a lot for humiliating me in front of everyone. I hope you're happy now that you've turned Mom and Dad against me. All I was trying to do was keep the peace and you made me look like some kind of villain. I stared at the messages, amazed that even now, he was trying to make himself the victim. I typed back, you made yourself look like a villain by lying to everyone for 6 months. His response came immediately. I didn't lie. I interpreted situations and tried to manage them so everyone would be happy. By keeping you away from my own family? By protecting you from feeling left out when everything became about Leo? You should be thanking me. I threw my phone on my couch and walked away from it. He was actually trying to convince me that isolating me from family events was some kind of favor. But the messages kept coming. Over the next 2 days, I got a steady stream of texts from Ethan, each one more desperate than the last. He accused me of weaponizing our parents against him. He said I was trying to destroy his marriage by making Nora doubt him. He even claimed I was jealous of his relationship with Leo and was trying to sabotage it. The worst one came Tuesday night. I know you've always resented me for being the first to give mom and dad grandchildren, but trying to turn them against me isn't going to make you feel better about being single and childless. That one made me put my phone in a drawer for the rest of the night. Wednesday morning, my mom called. "Honey," she said, her voice a little too light. "I wanted to let you know that Ethan called us last night. He's very upset." "I'm sure he is," I said carefully. "He says you've been sending him angry texts and threatening to cut him out of family events." My stomach dropped. "Mom, that's not what happened. He's the one who's been texting me nonstop trying to convince me that lying to everyone was actually him doing me a favor." "He mentioned that you might say something like that," Mom said, and her tone was different now, more cautious, like she was walking on eggshells. "He thinks you're still very angry about the misunderstanding and might not be seeing things clearly." Misunderstanding. He'd already reframed the whole thing as a misunderstanding. "Mom, can I read you some of the texts he sent me?" "Oh, sweetie. I don't think we need to get into all the back and forth. Ethan explained that emotions are running high and maybe you both said things you didn't mean." I felt that familiar sinking feeling, the one I'd been living with for months. Somehow, Ethan was already spinning this, and it was working. "What exactly did he tell you?" I asked, my voice flat. "Just that he's worried about you and he thinks maybe we should all take some time to cool down before we try to talk about this again." Take time to cool down. Let the heat die out of the moment so everyone could forget how angry they'd been when they saw the proof of his lies. "Mom, you saw the texts on Sunday. You saw proof that he was lying to all of us." "I know, honey, and we're not saying he handled things perfectly, but Ethan explained that he was just trying to spare everyone's feelings, and maybe he went about it the wrong way." Spare everyone's feelings. I wanted to scream. After I hung up with Mom, I decided to call my cousin Sarah. She'd been at a few family events recently, and I thought maybe she could give me some perspective on how obvious Ethan's lies had been to other people. "Oh, hey, Chloe," Sarah said when she picked up. "How are you doing? Ethan told me you guys had some kind of family drama at dinner Sunday." "He told you?" I asked, a fresh wave of dread washing over me. "What did he say?" "Just that you've been going through a hard time lately and you kind of exploded at him about some miscommunication with family events. He's worried about you." There it was again. I was going through a hard time. I had exploded. It was a miscommunication. "Sarah, did he tell you what the miscommunication was about?" "He said something about how he'd been trying to manage family invitations for you because you told him you were feeling overwhelmed with work, but then you got upset and accused him of keeping you away from family stuff on purpose." I could feel Ethan's version of events spreading through the family like a virus. By the time it got back to my parents, I'd be the unstable sister who'd had a breakdown and attacked poor Ethan for trying to help. "That's not what happened," I said, my voice tight with frustration. "He was telling Mom and Dad I was too busy for family events while telling me they didn't want me there. I have months of texts proving it." "Oh," Sarah said, but her tone was careful, distant now. "Well, I'm sure you guys will work it out. Family stuff is always complicated." When I hung up, I realized Ethan had already gotten to her. And if he'd gotten to Sarah, he'd probably gotten to everyone. That night, Nora texted me. "Hey, Chloe. I wanted to apologize for how tense things got at dinner. Ethan explained to me what's been going on, and I understand why you're frustrated. Maybe we can all sit down and talk when everyone's had some time to process." I stared at the text. Ethan had explained to her what was going on. She'd been sitting right there when the truth came out. She'd heard him admit to lying to her about me. I called her directly. "Nora, what exactly did Ethan tell you about Sunday night?" "Just that there's been some confusion about family invitations and you felt like he wasn't communicating well between you and your parents. He feels terrible about it." "Nora, you were there. You heard him admit that he told you I said babies weren't my thing when I never said that. You heard him admit he was keeping me away from family events." There was a long pause. "I mean, I know there was some miscommunication, but Ethan explained that he was just trying to manage everyone's expectations and it got out of hand." Ethan had gotten to his own wife. The woman who'd been sitting right next to him when his lies unraveled was now parroting his rewritten version of events. "He's been texting me for 3 days calling me jealous and vindictive," I said, my voice trembling with disbelief and rage. "Does that sound like someone who feels terrible about a miscommunication?" "I think everyone's just stressed," Nora said diplomatically. "Maybe some space would be good for everyone right now." After I hung up, I realized what Ethan had done. While I'd been sitting at home, shocked and angry about months of lies being exposed, he'd been working the phones. He'd called every family member he could think of, getting his version of the story out first. And his version was so much more palatable than the truth. In his version, I was unstable and vindictive. He was a concerned brother trying to help a struggling sister. The lies he told weren't malicious manipulation. They were well-meaning miscommunications that had gotten out of hand. And now, even the people who'd been sitting at that table on Sunday night were starting to believe his version instead of what they'd seen with their own eyes. I looked at my phone, seeing another string of texts from lies into a learning opportunity. I excused myself and went to find Sarah. She was glowing in her engagement dress, surrounded by friends, and I felt a pang of guilt for bringing family drama to her celebration. "Congratulations," I said, hugging her tightly. "I'm so happy for you." "Thanks, Chloe," she said, but her smile looked strained, a little forced. "I'm really glad you could make it. I know things have been complicated with family stuff lately." "Sarah, what exactly has Ethan told everyone?" She glanced around nervously. "Just that you guys had a misunderstanding about communication styles and everyone got a little heated. He seems really concerned about you." "Concerned about me?" I scoffed. "He mentioned that you've been under a lot of stress with work and maybe that's making family dynamics feel more intense than they actually are." I felt that familiar rage building in my chest, hot and sharp. Even at Sarah's engagement party, Ethan was spinning my confronting his lies into me being stressed and unstable. "Sarah, you know me. Have I ever caused drama at family events before?" "No, of course not," she said quickly, looking uncomfortable. "But people go through rough patches. Ethan just wants to make sure you're okay." I walked away before I said something that would actually cause drama at her party. But the whispers followed me everywhere I went. I caught fragments of conversations that stopped when people noticed me listening. "Always seemed so put together, but you never know. Ethan is handling it really well, considering. Probably just needs some time." At one point, I overheard my Aunt Susan talking to my mom in the kitchen. "He's such a good brother," Susan was saying, still trying to include her in everything, even after she accused him of deliberately keeping her away from family. "That takes a lot of maturity." "Ethan has always been sensitive to other people's feelings," Mom replied. "I think he was genuinely trying to help Chloe manage her schedule, and she misinterpreted it." I stood in the doorway, listening to my own mother explain away months of documented lies as me misinterpreting Ethan's helpfulness. "Has she always been this intense?" Susan asked. "She's been different since Ethan had Leo," Mom said quietly. "I think seeing him become a father has been hard for her. She's always been competitive with him." "Competitive?" They thought I was jealous of my brother having a baby, not angry about being systematically excluded from family events. I walked into the kitchen. "Mom, can I talk to you?" Both women jumped, startled, realizing I'd heard them talking about me. Of course, sweetie, Mom said, but her tone was careful, guarded. I need you to understand something, I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. Ethan didn't misinterpret anything. He lied to you, to me, and to Nora for months. You saw the proof. I saw some texts that could be interpreted different ways, Mom said, her chin lifting slightly. And I think you're both at fault for not communicating directly with us. How could I communicate directly with you when Ethan was intercepting every opportunity for me to do that? Susan shifted uncomfortably. Maybe I should give you two some privacy. No, stay, I said, looking at her directly. I want everyone to hear this. Ethan told you I was too busy for family events while telling me you didn't want me there. He admitted it at dinner 2 weeks ago. You heard him admit it. What I heard, Mom said firmly, a wall going up in her voice, was a family disagreement that got out of hand because everyone was emotional. He told Nora I said babies weren't my thing. He told Dad I was going through a phase where I didn't want to be around family. He told Sarah I was stressed and making everything more dramatic than it needed to be. Are those all just miscommunications? Mom's face tightened, a hard line forming around her mouth. Chloe, I think you need to ask yourself why you're so determined to paint your brother as some kind of villain. He made some mistakes in how he handled things, but his heart was in the right place. Susan nodded sympathetically, her eyes full of pity. Sometimes when we're going through a hard time, it's easier to blame someone else than to look at our own part in the situation. I stared at both of them. They'd completely rewritten the entire situation in their minds. Ethan wasn't a manipulator who'd lied to everyone for months. He was a concerned brother trying to help his difficult sister. I wasn't someone who'd been systematically excluded from family events. I was a jealous, unstable woman who was lashing out because I couldn't handle my brother's happiness. You know what? I said, a bitter laugh escaping me. You're right. This is clearly all my fault. I should apologize to Ethan for having evidence of his lies. I walked out of the kitchen and straight to where Ethan was still entertaining relatives with Leo. The group parted slightly when I approached, like they were worried I might do something unpredictable. Ethan, I said, loudly enough for everyone to hear. I owe you an apology. His face lit up with surprise and relief, a self-satisfied smirk playing on his lips. Chloe, you don't have to. No, I do, I continued, my voice unwavering. I'm Ethan. This time, he was asking me to be the bigger person and help him smooth things over with our parents. They're talking about not inviting me to family events, he wrote. Is that really what you want? To tear our family apart over a misunderstanding? Even when he was begging me for help, he was still calling it a misunderstanding. And somehow, he was making me responsible for fixing the mess he'd created. The next family gathering was my cousin Sarah's engagement party 2 weeks later. I almost didn't go, but Mom called to specifically ask if I'd be there. Of course, Sarah wants you there, she'd said. And I think it would be good for you and Ethan to be in the same room again. Maybe you can both move past this whole thing. Move past this whole thing. Like 6 months of manipulation was just a speed bump we needed to get over. I walked into the party and immediately felt the shift in energy. Conversations died down when I entered rooms. Aunts and uncles gave me tight smiles before finding excuses to drift away. My Uncle Mark, who'd always been friendly, nodded at me from across the room, but didn't come over. Ethan was already there, of course, holding Leo and charming a group of relatives with some story about Leo's first attempts at walking. Everyone was laughing and cooing over the baby, and he looked completely in his element. When he saw me, he gave me this sad, brave smile, like he was being the bigger person by acknowledging my presence despite how terribly I had supposedly treated him. Hey, Chloe, he said when I walked over to congratulate Sarah. I'm glad you made it. The relatives around him went quiet, watching our interaction like they were waiting for me to start drama. Of course, I made it, I said, my voice even. It's Sarah's engagement party. I just know how busy you've been, Ethan said, and there it was again, that loaded word delivered with just the right tone of concerned pity. I wasn't sure if you'd have time. Aunt Carol jumped in immediately. Oh, Chloe's always been so career-focused. That's wonderful, honey, but don't forget to make time for family, too. I stared at her, feeling a fresh wave of despair. I haven't missed a family event by choice in 6 months. Well, Carol said awkwardly, glancing at Ethan. I know there was some confusion about invitations, but that's all sorted out now, right? Ethan nodded earnestly. I think we're all learning to communicate better. It's been a growing experience for everyone. A growing experience. He turned months of sorry that when you spent 6 months lying to our entire family about me, I had the audacity to keep screenshots of your texts as evidence. That was really unfair of me. The group went dead silent. Ethan's smile faltered, his eyes wide with dawning panic. I'm also sorry that when you told Nora I said babies weren't my thing, I expected you to tell the truth about that. And I'm especially sorry that when you told our parents I was too busy for family while telling me they didn't want me around, I thought that was manipulative instead of helpful. Chloe, Ethan said quietly, his face going red, his voice barely a whisper. This isn't the place. You're right, I said, a cold calm settling over me. This isn't the place. But then again, neither was the dinner table 2 weeks ago, and you seemed fine with having that conversation in front of everyone. The difference is, 2 weeks ago, you thought you could control the narrative. I turned to walk away, but Ethan grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my skin. Why are you doing this? Why can't you just let it go? I looked down at his hand on my arm, then back up at his face, seeing the fear there, the desperation. Because you're still lying, Ethan. Even now, even after everything, you're still trying to convince everyone that this is my fault. I'm not lying, he said, but his voice cracked, the lie hollow. I made some mistakes, but I never meant, you meant every word, I said, loud enough for the whole group to hear, for the truth to echo in the sudden silence. You wanted me gone from family events, and you found a way to make it happen while making everyone think it was my choice. I pulled my arm free and walked toward the door. Behind me, I could hear Ethan trying to salvage the situation, his voice high and desperate as he attempted to explain to everyone that I was having some kind of breakdown. But for the first time since this whole thing started, I didn't care what story he told them. I was done trying to prove the truth to people who were determined to believe his lies. Monday morning, I got a call from Nora. Her voice sounded different, less diplomatic, more frustrated. Like she was truly at the end of her rope. Chloe, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Okay, I said, bracing myself for another conversation where I'd have to defend reality. Did you really tell Ethan that you thought Leo was boring because he's just a baby? I nearly dropped my phone. What? No, Nora, I've never said anything like that. Where is this coming from? Ethan told me yesterday that you said it at Sarah's party. He said you were upset about all the attention Leo gets and you made some comment about how babies are boring and you don't understand why everyone makes such a big deal about them. Nora, I barely spoke to Ethan at the party and I would never, ever say something like that about Leo or any baby. There was a long pause. That's what I thought because it didn't sound like you. But Ethan was so specific about it. What exactly did he say? He said you pulled him aside and told him you were tired of every family event being about Leo and that you didn't get why everyone was so fascinated by a baby who just eats and sleeps. He said you seemed really bitter about it. I felt that familiar chill, the cold dread creeping in again. Nora, I never pulled Ethan aside at that party. The only conversation we had was in front of a group of relatives when I confronted him about his lies. About his what do you mean, lies? The lies he's been telling everyone. About me being too busy for family events. About me not wanting to be around family. About me being jealous and unstable. None of that is true. Nora was quiet for a long moment. Chloe, I'm starting to think I need to hear your side of the story, the whole story, because some things aren't adding up. I spent the next hour on the phone with Nora, walking her through everything: the texts, the missed invitations, the systematic exclusion from family events, and Ethan's campaign to rewrite history after he got caught. I read her some of the messages he'd sent me, the ones where he admitted to managing family communications. "Oh my God," Nora said when I finished, a strangled sound in her throat. "Chloe, I had no idea. He told me you were going through some kind of quarter-life crisis and lashing out at family because you felt left behind, and you believed him." Her voice got quiet, thick with emotion. I wanted to believe him. It was easier than thinking my husband was lying to everyone for months. "But there have been other things," she continued, "small things, stories that didn't quite match up. Times when he said you'd cancelled plans, but then you'd mentioned something that suggested you never knew about the plans in the first place." "Like what?" "Your birthday dinner last year. Ethan said you didn't want to celebrate because you were feeling weird about turning another year older without being married or having kids. But then you mentioned to me later that nobody had asked what you wanted to do for your birthday." I remembered that birthday. I'd spent it alone, assuming my family had forgotten. Ethan had told everyone I wanted to skip celebrating. "Nora, how many other things has he lied about?" "I don't know," she said, and she sounded scared, truly scared. "I'm starting to wonder if I know my own husband at all." That afternoon, my cousin Sarah called. "Chloe, I owe you an apology," she said without preamble, her voice tight. "I've been thinking about what happened at my party, and I realized I never actually asked you what your side of the story was. I just listened to Ethan and assumed he was telling the truth." "What made you change your mind?" "I was talking to my mom about it, and she reminded me of something. Remember last Christmas when Ethan said you told him you couldn't make it to our family's Christmas Eve dinner because you had plans with friends?" "I never said that. He never even told me about the dinner." "That's what I'm starting to think because my mom said she ran into you at the grocery store that day and you seemed really sad when she asked if you were okay. You said something about how you wished you had family plans for Christmas Eve, but everyone seemed to have their own thing going on." I remembered that conversation. Sarah's mom had been so sweet, and I'd been trying not to cry in the frozen food aisle because I thought my family had stopped including me in Christmas traditions. "Sarah, Ethan has been lying about me for a lot longer than just the past few months. I'm starting to see that. And Chloe, at the party when you confronted him in front of everyone, he looked panicked, not hurt or confused like someone who'd been falsely accused. He looked like someone who'd been caught. Did anyone else notice that?" "A few people mentioned it to me afterward. Uncle Mark said something about how Ethan's story kept changing every time someone asked him about it. That evening, Uncle Mark himself called me. "Chloe, I owe you an apology," he said, his voice gruff but sincere. "I've been hearing different versions of this family drama from different people, and I realized I never heard yours." "I appreciate that, Uncle Mark. I also realized something else. For the past year or so, every time I've asked about you at family gatherings, Ethan always has some explanation for why you're not there. And those explanations have been getting more and more elaborate." "What do you mean?" "Well, at first it was just that you were busy with work. Then it became you were going through a phase where you needed space from family. Then it was that you were feeling awkward around Leo because you wanted kids but weren't dating anyone seriously. Yesterday at the party, he told 3 different people 3 different reasons why you've been difficult lately." "What did he say?" I felt sick, a cold dread washing over me. "He told your Aunt Susan that you've been struggling with depression and taking it out on family. He told Cousin Mark that you've always been jealous of him and having a baby just made it worse. And he told me that you've been drinking too much and getting emotional about everything." None of that is true. I know it's not. That's why I'm calling. I've known you your whole life, Chloe. You're not jealous. You're not a dramatic person. And You've never been anything but supportive of your brother. But Ethan has been working overtime to convince everyone otherwise. Why didn't anyone question it before now? Because it's easier to believe one person is having problems than to believe someone you love is capable of that kind of manipulation, Mark said sadly. And because Ethan is very good at making his lies sound reasonable and concerned rather than malicious. So, what changed your mind? I started paying attention to his body language when he talked about you, and I noticed that he never seemed sad about your supposed problems. He seemed satisfied, like he enjoyed having everyone worried about you instead of questioning him. That night, Mom called. But this time, her voice was different, stripped of its caution, replaced by a quiet intensity. "Chloe, I've been doing some thinking since Sarah's party," she said. "And I've been going back through some conversations I had with Ethan over the past year." "What kind of conversations?" "Times when I asked about you and he gave me explanations for why you weren't around or why you seemed distant. I'm starting to realize that a lot of those explanations contradicted things you told me directly." I held my breath, hope swelling in my chest. "And I keep thinking about something Nora said to me yesterday. She asked me if I remembered you ever actually saying you wanted space from family or that you were too busy for us. And I realized I don't. Every conversation I've had with you, you've seemed like you wanted more family time, not less. Mom, I think I owe you a very big apology, sweetheart. I think your brother has been lying to all of us for a very long time, and I think I let him because it was easier than admitting that my son was capable of something so hurtful." I started crying then, big, heaving sobs. After months of feeling like I was losing my mind, feeling invisible, having my own mother acknowledge the truth felt like being able to breathe again, like a crushing weight had finally been lifted. "There's something else," Mom said, her voice firmer. "Your father and I have been talking, and we've decided we want to have a family dinner this weekend. Just us, and you, and Ethan, and Nora. No extended family, no distractions. We want to get to the bottom of this once and for all." "Mom, he's just going to lie again. He'll come up with explanations for everything and make me look like I'm attacking him." "Not this time," Mom said, and her voice had a steel in it I hadn't heard in years. "This time, we're going in prepared, because if our son has been manipulating our family for months, we need to know. And if he has, there are going to be consequences." Saturday night arrived, and I sat in my parents' living room with my phone in my lap, every damning text conversation ready to go. Mom and Dad had spent the week preparing for this dinner like they were building a legal case. And for the first time in months, I felt like I had backup. Ethan walked in with Nora and Leo, and immediately I could tell something was off. His usual confident swagger was replaced by something twitchy and defensive. Nora looked nervous, avoiding eye contact with everyone. "Thanks for setting this up," Ethan said, as he settled Leo in his portable high chair, trying to sound jovial. "I think it's good that we're all talking about the situation like adults." Dad didn't smile back. "We think it's overdue." Mom served dinner in tense silence, and I could feel Ethan trying to read the room, trying to gauge the mood. Usually, he'd be regaling everyone with stories about Leo by now. But tonight, he seemed to sense that his usual charm offensive wasn't going to work. "So," Dad said once everyone had food on their plates, his voice calm but authoritative. "We want to clear up some confusion about family communications over the past year." "Right," Ethan said immediately, shifting into damage control mode. "I think there were definitely some miscommunications on everyone's part, and I take responsibility for my role in that." "What role was that, exactly?" Mom asked, her eyes fixed on him. Ethan glanced between our parents, clearly trying to gauge how much trouble he was in. "I think I tried too hard to manage everyone's expectations and ended up creating confusion instead of preventing it." "Manage expectations how?" Dad pressed, relentless. "Well, you know how Chloe has been really focused on her career lately, and sometimes she's had to cancel plans last minute. I was trying to spare everyone's feelings by handling those conversations for her instead of making her feel guilty about it." I opened my mouth to respond, but Dad held up a hand. Ethan, we want you to be very specific. Can you give us an example of a time when Chloe asked you to cancel plans for her? Ethan's fork paused halfway to his mouth. I mean, it wasn't always that direct. Sometimes she'd mention being stressed about work, and I'd read between the lines. Read between the lines, Mom repeated, her voice dripping with skepticism. So, you made assumptions about what she wanted without asking her directly. I was trying to be considerate, Ethan said, but his voice had that high pitch again, a clear sign of his distress. Chloe's always been sensitive about feeling pressured to do family stuff, so I thought, when has Chloe ever been sensitive about family stuff? Dad interrupted, cutting him off sharply. In 32 years, when has your sister ever complained about spending time with family? Ethan looked trapped, his eyes darting around. I mean, not complained exactly, but, Ethan, Nora said quietly, her voice barely a whisper. Just tell them the truth. Everyone turned to look at her. She was staring at her plate, her knuckles white around her fork. Nora? Mom said gently, leaning forward. What truth? Nora looked up, and I could see tears in her eyes, a mixture of fear and something like defiance. Ethan, they're going to find out anyway. All of it. Find out what? Dad asked, his voice getting dangerous, the quiet intensity now a simmering anger. Ethan shot Nora a panicked look. Nora, don't what? She snapped, finally looking at him, her eyes flashing. Don't tell them how you've been lying to me, too? Don't tell them about the group chat? My stomach dropped. What group chat? Nora pulled out her phone with shaking hands. Ethan has a group chat with some of his college friends. They call it family drama updates. He's been sharing screenshots of your texts to him, Chloe, and making fun of you. The room went completely silent, a stunned, heavy quiet, except for Leo babbling in his high chair, completely unaware. What? I whispered, my voice barely audible, the horror slowly sinking in. He'd made a game out of isolating me from my own family. Nora's voice was getting stronger now, like she'd been holding this in for weeks, the dam finally breaking. He told them how he was managing the family dynamics by keeping you away from events. His friends thought it was hilarious how clueless everyone was. Dad's chair scraped against the floor as he pushed back from the table so abruptly it toppled backward with a crash. Show us. I can't, Nora said. He deleted the chat when I confronted him about it yesterday, but I took screenshots first. She swiped through her phone and held it up. Even from across the table, I could see Ethan's messages in a group chat called Family Drama Updates. Read it out loud, Mom said, her voice deadly quiet, a tremor of fury beneath the calm. Nora cleared her throat, her voice trembling slightly, but firm. This is from 3 months ago. She read. Ethan wrote, Operation Keep Chloe Busy is working perfectly. Told the parents she's in her career-focused phase and doesn't want family pressure. Told her they're doing small gatherings since the baby takes all their energy. Everyone's happy and I don't have to share the spotlight. Win-win. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. There's more, Nora continued, her voice gaining strength as she read, the weight of the words filling the room. From last month, Chloe tried to call Mom directly about Easter plans, but I intercepted and told Mom she was just being polite and didn't really want to come. Then told Chloe that Mom said it was just immediate family. The woman has no idea she's being managed. Mom made a sound like a wounded animal, a raw, choked sob. And this one, Nora continued, her gaze unwavering as she looked at Ethan, from 2 weeks ago, after your confrontation dinner, family dinner was a disaster. Chloe had screenshots of everything and parents lost their minds, but I'm spinning it as her having a breakdown from work stress and jealousy about the baby. Nora's buying it. Parents are starting to buy it. Damage control in progress. Dad stood up so fast his chair toppled backward. Get out. Dad, wait. Ethan said, his voice cracking, desperate. It's not what it looks like. Get out of my house. Ethan jumped up, reaching instinctively for Leo. You're overreacting. It was just venting to friends. You made a group chat to mock your sister, Mom said, standing up too, her eyes blazing with fury. You turned her exclusion from family events into entertainment for your college buddies. It wasn't like that, Ethan protested, but he was backing toward the door, his movements jerky and unsure. I never meant, you meant every word, I said, finally finding my voice, a cold, hard certainty in each syllable. You planned this, all of it. You wanted me gone from family events, and you found a way to make it happen while making everyone think it was my choice. That's not true, Ethan said desperately, his face contorted. I love you, Chloe. You're my sister. Sisters don't do this to each other, Nora said, still scrolling through her screenshots, her own face etched with betrayal. Oh, here's a good one. From Leo's birthday party, Chloe sent a present, but didn't come because I told her it was too chaotic for extra people. Then told everyone she was too busy with work to show up. She actually thanked me for understanding her schedule. This is almost too easy. Ethan was shaking his head frantically, a pathetic sight. Nora, you're taking everything out of context. What context makes this okay? She demanded, her voice sharp, cutting through his protestations. What context makes lying to your family for months and then bragging about it to your friends okay? I was protecting everyone, Ethan said, but even he didn't sound like he believed it anymore. Chloe's always gotten more attention than me. And after Leo was born, I thought, you thought what? Dad roared, his voice shaking the room. That you had the right to manipulate your entire family because you were jealous? I wasn't jealous, Ethan said weakly. You were pathetic, Mom said again, the word hanging heavy in the air, weighted with utter disappointment. You were so threatened by your own sister that you had to sabotage her relationships with everyone she loves. Nora stood up, lifting Leo from his high chair, her movements deliberate. I'm taking Leo home. Ethan, you can find your own ride. Nora, please, Ethan said, reaching for her arm, his face pleading. Don't do this. Think about our family. I am thinking about our family, she said, pulling away from him, her gaze firm. I'm thinking about how I don't want Leo growing up thinking this kind of behavior is normal. She looked at me with tears in her eyes, a genuine apology in her expression. Chloe, I am so sorry. I should have questioned his stories from the beginning. I should have talked to you directly. Nora, you don't have to, I started, but she cut me off. Yes, I do, she said firmly. Because I was part of this. I let him convince me that you didn't want to be involved with Leo, and I never once thought to ask you myself. I'm ashamed of that. She kissed Leo's head and looked at my parents. Thank you for handling this, and thank you for not giving up on the truth. After Nora left, Ethan tried one more desperate play. Mom, Dad, I know I made mistakes, but you have to understand the pressure I've been under being a new father, trying to balance everyone's needs. Stop, Dad said, his voice weary but resolute. Just stop. We've heard enough. But if you could just, Ethan, Mom said, and her voice was ice, cold and unforgiving. I want you to listen to me very carefully. You have spent months lying to every person in this family. You turned your sister's love for us against her. You made us think she didn't want to spend time with us. You made her think we didn't want her around. You bragged about it to your friends like it was a joke. I know it looks bad. It doesn't just look bad, Dad said, his voice flat with disgust. It is bad. You are bad. What kind of person does this to their own family? Ethan was crying now, ugly, desperate tears, his shoulders shaking. I can make this right. I can fix this. No, Mom said, her voice breaking a little. You can't, because we'll never trust you again. Every story you tell, every explanation you give, we'll wonder if it's another lie designed to manipulate us. Please, Ethan begged, looking small and broken. I'm your son. Right now, Dad said, his voice devoid of warmth, you're a stranger who looks like our son. The son we raised wouldn't have done this. Ethan looked at me one last time, his face crumpled and desperate, searching for something, anything. Chloe, please tell them this isn't what I am. Tell them I'm not a monster. I looked at him. Really looked at him, and felt nothing but emptiness where my love for my brother used to be. You made a group chat to mock me, I said quietly, each word precise, detached. You turned excluding me from family events into a game for your friends' entertainment. You made our parents think I didn't love them anymore. You made me think they didn't love me. I stood up slowly, the silence in the room heavy with the weight of my words. I don't know what you are, Ethan, but you're not my brother anymore. He left then, finally, and the house fell silent, except for the sound of Mom crying, soft, heartbreaking sobs. Dad came over and put his arms around both of us, holding us tight. I'm sorry, sweetheart. I'm so sorry we let this happen. How are you supposed to know? I said, leaning into him, utterly exhausted. He's been playing this game for months, maybe longer. That's what scares me, Mom said, wiping her eyes, her voice raw. How long has he been lying to us? How many other things has he manipulated that we'll never even know about? We sat together in the wreckage of our family dinner, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. The truth was finally out, all of it. And there was no way for Ethan to spin this or rewrite history or convince anyone that I was the problem. His own words had condemned him. His own arrogance had been his downfall, and now everyone could see exactly who he really was. 2 days later, Mom called to tell me they were planning a makeup dinner for the following weekend. Just me, them, and Nora with Leo. Ethan wasn't invited. Nora's filing for separation, Mom said quietly. She said she can't trust anything he's told her about anything anymore, and she doesn't want Leo growing up thinking manipulation is normal. How is she doing? Better than expected. She said it actually explains a lot of things that never made sense about their relationship. Apparently, this wasn't just about you. He's been controlling information and managing her relationships with other people, too. That evening, Dad texted me a photo from their bedroom. They'd taken down the family portrait that had been hanging there for 2 years, the one with all of us, including Ethan holding baby Leo. In its place was an older photo from before Leo was born. Just the 4 of us at my college graduation. Until he proves he's changed, Dad's text read, if he ever can. The makeup dinner was everything family dinners used to be before Ethan turned them into battlefields. Nora brought Leo, who immediately reached for me when he saw me, his tiny arms outstretched. And for the first time, I got to actually spend time with my nephew without Ethan hovering and managing every interaction. Mom and Dad couldn't stop apologizing, but I kept telling them the truth. There was no way they could have known. Ethan had been playing a long game, and he'd been very good at it. The worst part, Mom said as we cleaned up dishes, her voice heavy with reflection, is wondering what else he's lied about over the years. How many other situations has he manipulated that we just accepted as truth? Nora overheard and nodded grimly. I've been going through our entire relationship in my head. So many fights we had that started because he told me someone said something they probably never said. So many friendships I lost because he convinced me people didn't really like me. He won't get the chance to do it again, Dad said firmly, his jaw set. Not to any of us. 3 weeks later, I got a long email from Ethan. It was full of apologies and explanations, promises to go to therapy and make amends. He said he understood why everyone was angry, but hoped that someday we could work toward forgiveness. I deleted it without responding. My family was back, and Ethan was out. For once, I wasn't the forgotten one. He was. How do you ever truly forgive someone who played with your heart like that?